I'm Bill Auten of Auten Claims Management.
I'm Chantal Roberts of CMR Consulting, and welcome to the Art of Adjusting podcast.
Today, we're going to talk about life as an insurance adjuster from the perspective of property, auto, liability, or workers' compensation adjusters. Our goal is to bring interesting topics in the world of claims adjusting to people who are working as an adjuster now and to people who are considering a career as a claims adjuster.
Good morning.
Hey, Chantal, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing really good. It's springtime. Today's supposed to be in the 70s. First time in a little while that it's been that kind of weather for us. So we're looking forward to that.
Yes.
And
It,
spring is always volatile when it comes to weather.
let's
You
talk
get a
about
lot
that.
of ups and downs and ins and outs and all kinds of fun stuff.
Let's talk about that because I have a little evergreen tree that's been growing for like 5 years now, and I swear it looks like it's dying, but ChatGPT tells me it is not,
Okay.
that it is just winter stressed, quote unquote, and wind stressed. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do with you. It's brown because today will be 78, tomorrow will be 50 something. Then we go up to the 60s. It's killing me. It's absolutely killing me.
March and April tend to tease everybody and give you some nice days and then hit you with snow and wet weather when you least expect it or want it.
Mostly want it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, that leads to the whole wind, tornado alley kind of deal. And then because we have wind claims, it may lead to interior water damage. And so we're going to be talking about wind, water, and property claims.
Yeah. Probably a little hail too, I'm
Oh,
guessing.
yeah. Well, you can't have spring weather without the hail.
Yeah.
You can't, absolutely not. And so be sure to like, subscribe, follow, comment, all of that kind of stuff because it really pushes us to other people who are insurance professionals, adjusters, and industry partners. So that's my little spiel for today. Hey,
Yes. Nice spiel. All right.
thank you. I practiced it in the mirror
Good.
beforehand.
Right on. I can tell.
Yeah,
Anyway, we're talking about a spring storm loss profile. So
yes.
what does that mean? So we're talking about wind-driven elements like rain and hail and falling trees
Or limbs.
and limbs and
Mm,
freeze thaw cycles
yes.
and damage coming from that. Um,
Yeah, and a lot of
uh,
times these things overlap, and it's really hard to figure out, well, when did this thing happen? And one of the things too is we may have damage creep, which I'd like to talk about in just a minute.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, overlap can happen all the time. You know, the insured will call, "Hey, my roof is leaking in my living room over
Mhm.
the window, and it's leaking in the bedroom over the window." And I'm pretty sure it has something to do with the tree that fell, but that fell in the back of the house. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Can
Yeah.
you send somebody out? So that sounds like they probably have an ice dam situation, which is more of a winter claim, but we see them up here in the north in March.
That's because y'all are crazy for living up there. It's
Yeah,
cold. Yeah, we've
well,
talked about that before. See all of the episodes, see all of the previous episodes.
it's
Um,
not that cold though. I just recently drove through a part of New York State that's very flat, and I did some research on that area. There used to be a large lake there
oh,
10,000 years ago,
uh-huh.
and that was when the ice age happened. Now, what I didn't realize is where the area where I was driving through the ice is said to have been over a mile thick.
Wow.
Could you believe
That's what
that?
Greenland is. Like they say that 90% of the island has never, or continent, whichever one you want to call it, but I guess island, since we only have seven continents. Anyway, that 90% of the island has not been, explored because
Right.
a lot
It's under
of,
under the ice.
yeah, it's like a mile thick.
Yeah, it's crazy to even uh imagine that. So Well, I don't want to hear any complaints about snow and ice. We got it pretty easy
Yeah.
since the ice age, but
Yes, we do. Okay.
nonetheless, overlap. We have those two incidents I just talked about. They're actually two separate incidents, and they
Yes.
would be subject to two separate deductibles.
Yes.
And the adjuster should note that in the file. If it's an independent, you're going to have to tell the carrier they probably need to open two separate claims.
Yes.
If you're a staff adjuster, you should be doing that and explaining to the insured how the coverage works and all that, because they're going to not be happy if they have
Yeah.
to pay two deductibles.
No, but you should absolutely open two files. And so often I don't see where carriers are opening two files. But if you think about this logically, unless the insured has a flat roof or something to that effect, and most of the time they don't, except maybe out in, the western states or something to that effect. But you've got a gabled or sloping roof, so you will have a apex on it. And if the tree fell in the back of the house, rainwater is not going to go up the interior of the roof over the little point, the apex, and then down the other side of the roof to leak on the front part of the house. I mean, that's just physics, not to mention logic.
Yeah,
So
and is
you
it
do have to,
possible for it to leak on the front of the house when the tree damaged the back of the house? It is possible
mm,
because the way the roof slopes, you never know. So due diligence comes into
yep.
play. Just because there's two different looking types of damage at the property doesn't necessarily mean that they're not related. So, um,
You would need to. I want to make sure that the adjusters understand either you or your field adjusters have to physically be in that attic
yes,
taking photographs. And if
yes,
they're and what you have to show is not only if it did happen, like the front leak was caused by the tree falling in the back, and you would know this because you would see water running, I don't know, along the trusses or something. It could
right.
happen. Like you said,
It
it
could,
could happen.
it
Uh,
could.
I,
So it's your
I
job to verify.
exactly. Or I don't know, maybe the insulation got sopping wet, but you would think that that would be more interior water from the back before you get to the front.
Right.
Anyway, y- I'm
A
saying use
dutiful
your,
adjuster
yes,
will always verify with
use your
good
brain.
photographs and yes. And if you
And
don't know, find somebody who does. Find
yes.
somebody either at your office who's been, around the horn a few times, or maybe a trusted contractor,
Mhm.
if or even an engineer if if the claim is large and warrants the expense of an engineer, that might be an option also.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about damage creep because I feel like we're
Yeah, yeah.
going to talk about this just a little bit, and I'm seeing it a little bit in my expert witness cases. So I thought it might be good to address. And it was something that I learned painfully, very painfully learned over Hurricane Katrina. And this is when our field adjusters would go out, take pictures of the roof, for example, but wouldn't go inside because at the time the insured would say, yeah, there's nothing damaged on the inside or whatever. And 2 years later, a year later, or whatever, they're now claiming interior water damage. Well, the insured never mitigated their losses because they feared that cashing the check or beginning repairs or whatever would somehow hamper or hinder a future claim. And of course,
Right.
that's the discussion that you have to have with the insured as well. However, let me stay on this topic. The deal is that we would actually get a lot of complaints and lawsuits saying that the field adjuster had never been up on the roof. And so we started requiring the adjuster to take a picture of their shoe on the roof
Oh, interesting.
to
Yeah.
prove that they have been there.
I've
And
actually heard that before. So,
and then we would have the adjuster ask, is there any interior water damage? No. Great. Okay, so we're going to come in and take pictures showing that there's no interior water damage. so that if interior water damage occurs or is claimed at a later date, it either is one, the insured hasn't uh, mitigated their own losses, which is contrary to their duties in the policy, or it's a new loss. It if you don't take these pictures inside or in the attic space or whatever, then you may be taking that damage as part of the original loss. And it's damage creep because
Hmm.
either we've got a new loss or the insured didn't do what they were supposed to.
Right. It can happen in a way that there is coverage also.
Yes,
As
absolutely.
ice dams are probably the biggest culprit here because you
Yes.
can't really if there is damage to the roof, you can't really get up there. Once it starts leaking, you kind of have to hold on and wait until it's done because the ice is so thick up there. I've seen adjusters, I'm sorry, I've seen contractors utilize heating elements up there to try and mitigate it. But by the time they're up there and doing that, the water's already moving through the attic and everything. And um,
And
you can put buckets down and towels and wait it out. And usually it doesn't take long, a
right.
few hours, it leaks through, and then it's just a matter of cleanup and repair.
And that's not to say that, again, too, like you said, there may not be covered loss because also the one thing that I'm seeing adjusters not explain to their insureds, and again, it comes from this fear that the insured doesn't want to mitigate any of their losses or do any of their losses for fear that they'll mess something up. And this is when you have to have that conversation of saying, okay, so not only is it your duty, but also there's there could be a supplement, and we would pay for covered causes of loss or damage that result from this accident. So, start tearing it down. Contractors know what to do. You got to do something with it. We've given you at least what we think is going to repair it. And if you find more damage, give us a call. I'm not seeing that a lot and in some of the claims that I'm getting as an expert witness. So that also leads to damage creep because the insureds are paralyzed with fear
Yep.
about doing
The
this.
the um, the concept of a supplement. Well, okay, let me talk about a few different things. I've heard insureds saying they didn't want to cash the check because they thought it would terminate the claim. You brought that up.
Mhm.
Um, it an adjuster should be explaining that that does not terminate the claim. Sometimes there's a lot of carriers that will take a proof of loss on really relatively small claims. So $2,500 and above, they'll take a proof of loss and they'll have the insured sign it. And if they require it's notarized, then the insured thinks it's this super official document, which it is, but it does not close the claim and it does not finalize the claim. I've even had this discussion with adjusters who say, well, they can't make a supplement. They've signed a proof of loss. Well, that's not
Yes.
the truth at all.
Right. And if you read, by the way, adjusters, if you literally read the proof of loss down on the bottom, small print, it says this doesn't close the claim or something legalese in that fashion. All it is a proof that a loss occurred in that amount for this policy on this date.
It
That's
is your
all it is.
sworn statement that a certain type of damage or loss occurred on a certain date, and it's your statement to the insurance company that something happened, and
That's all it
that's pretty
is.
much all it is.
All it is.
It's very formalized, yes, and it's not the easiest thing to read. Um, I did a video for agents back in I don't remember 2014 or 2013. It's still on YouTube, I think, from my old company, explaining what a proof of loss is. It is the most boring video you ever want to watch, but
So
you'll
if you
get a
need
lot.
something to fall asleep with,
Yes.
guys,
But if you
look
ever have
that
a
up.
question about what a proof of loss is and its function and what all that stuff on the form means, you can watch that video and it explains it pretty well. Um, But the one document that will terminate a claim is a policyholder's release, which is sometimes used, but not very often. And
Two totally different
that's
things.
totally different things.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Anyway, so I wanted to just discuss damage creep because the insureds are often nervous because they get a contractor's estimate that is very different than what ours is. So anyway, we will
yeah,
probably talk about that more. So early cause of loss determination requires a lot of discipline. It requires you, like we said, to be sure you get up in the attic, take pictures of the entire roof or ceiling or whatever. Uh, Again, I always like to have the contractor with my field appraiser or adjuster so that we don't get into this battling estimate kind of deal. We can try to get all of this done and not necessarily one fell swoop, but there you go.
we're going to move on here to wind versus wear and tear versus water damage.
Yes. A
So,
big, big issue.
when would we see most of that kind of those kinds of issues? And I'm going to say claims that involve roofs.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And this is becoming more and more of an issue. Another thing that I am seeing is, of course, everything is uber expensive. And so people are not taking care of their roofs, are not doing preventative maintenance. We've had a hailstorm come through recently in Kansas, maybe a month and a half ago, and the amount of contractors that I have calling me wanting to put a new roof on my house,
Mm.
and the amount of roofing salespeople who are stopping by our house, I am literally considering putting a note on the door saying, "We are adjusters. We
Right,
don't need a new roof. Go
right,
away." Because as soon as I say, and it's really kind of funny to watch them do the backpedaling, because as soon as I say, "Yeah, we're adjusters," I don't even need to say anything else. They just
right.
start backpedaling. But think about what we've got. Does my roof have hail impacts? Yes, absolutely. Does it have some wear and tear? Yeah, sure it does. Do I need a new roof? Not right now. However, I do want to talk to you, and I know that you're probably antsing to get in here. I want to talk about this new idea that has come out, and Chip Merlin has even mentioned it, where even one hail storm could cause our roof to act as if it's 10 years older or whatever.
I guess the question comes down to direct physical loss,
Yes.
um, repairability,
Mm-hmm.
and if those two conditions are met there, where you have actual loss to the item, damage per se, then and you can't repair it, what is one to do?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been on I don't know how many roofs in my life. Every time I go on a roof, it doesn't matter whether there's been a storm recently or not, there are granules from the shingles in the gutter.
Yes.
Doesn't matter how old the roof is. It happens on brand new roofs after the first rainstorm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Yet that is often pointed to as evidence that, oh, your roof is now compromised because of a storm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's wear and tear. That's normal wear and tear. Unfortunately, what people, I guess, don't realize is asphalt shingles, they work really well. They're everywhere. We use them, but they wear out. They're not the best possible option for a roof covering because they wear out. And there's kind of a reason for that. There's a whole industry that depends on them wearing out and making new products. Steel roof is going to last a really long time. Uh, Clay tile roofs last pretty well. They are a little more fragile, maybe, than a steel roof.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Concrete.
None of these are um, completely impervious to damage.
Right.
Steel roofs, if a major hailstorm can cause denting and cosmetic damage to a steel roof.
Yes.
So,
But let's
um,
talk about that one too, because I've sat in with engineers who have shown me that because you hear this about steel roofs, and this is more commercial than it is homeowners, but the public adjusters, plaintiff attorneys will say that the steel roof, once it's impacted, it's like clear coating or UV rating or something to that effect, some invisible kind of shield that we can't see with our naked eye, but can be seen with a microscope, has been busted. And while that may or may not be true, what we're looking at is the functionality of the roof. If the roof still discards water and doesn't let water inside, keeps the inside dry, then the roof is still functioning. And so, like you said, it might be a cosmetic issue
mhm.
more so than something that needs to get repaired or replaced.
There's
But
I've
it
seen endorsements that take away loss for cosmetic only damage, and
yes.
I've not read them in detail, so I'm not really sure how they work or what they say. But
Basically, it says exactly what that is if this loss is deemed to be cosmetic in nature and that the roof still serves its functionality.
mhm,
And that's the big word right there, that the roof is still functioning as a roof should function, which is to take water away, keep the interior dry, then we, as the insurance company, are not going to pay. I have also started to see a lot of, and this is especially out in the West, where they may have the concrete tiles.
mhm.
And those are very interesting because you have to walk on them a certain way, because even just walking on them, unlike mostly our asphalt roofs where we could walk on it without really damaging it, although some granulars will come off. If you just walk on a concrete roof, even me, I would break a tile unless I
Right.
walk on it very, very specifically because of the way that they are positioned. Okay, besides that point, so a lot of people feel that once the concrete is broken, then it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. A lot of insurers now are having entire roofing schedules that say if you have an asphalt roof and it's 12 years old, we're going to deduct this much depreciation until you replace it. If you have a clay tile roof or a concrete roof or a steel roof, blah, 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 blah. And these are things that must be explained to the insured at the very beginning of the claim.
Mhm.
Because if you don't, adjusters, you're going to end up in a world of hurt. You're going to
So
end up in an argument.
talk a little bit about why these endorsements even exist, because 10 or 20 years ago,
Mhm.
maybe 20 years ago,
Yeah.
you really didn't see them. Um, I think I suspect what has changed, but in your opinion, what has changed?
I don't want to cast aspersions on whole entire industries. However, it is the popular opinion that this is from the contractors and public adjusters and plaintiff bar who come into an area. Florida is an excellent example where they may have hurricane damage or a lot of windstorm damage, something to that effect. And then these roofers and these contractors, public adjusters demand that the entire roof be replaced when maybe only one slope would need to be replaced or something to that effect. This has led to, of course, our loss indemnity cost just skyrocketing. And so our premiums aren't able to, of course, keep up. And it's kind of like a perfect storm because then the Department of Insurance is not approving the insurer to increase the premiums as I teach in my RMI class. And so now we've got insurers who are going bankrupt, like they did in Florida a couple of years ago. I think there were 8 of them that went under, all because of a lot of claims with a particular topic that many people don't understand, and then a few bad apples spoiling the bunch. So that's
Yeah,
the short
well,
version.
I agree on you've identified the cast of characters properly, and everything you said is absolutely spot on. I would just add that uh, the um, the effort that has the effort that has been undertaken by those folks to blur the lines between the wear and tear exclusion and the direct physical loss exclusion is where the problem lies. Insurance companies set out to say, look, maintenance and wear and tear and stuff, that's not really insurable. What we insure is fortuitous loss, something that
Right,
happens suddenly,
right.
something unexpected, like a tree falling on a house or a fire. And what has happened is they've taken they've taken the quote unquote damage and described that in a way that makes it sound as if it's fortuitous and
Mhm.
that now you've got a situation where it's direct physical loss.
Yes.
And that complicates things. So the insurance companies, the only way they can respond is to put more details into their policies to create a further separation between what wear and tear really is versus what a fortuitous loss really is. And that battle of words is never going to end, I guess.
No. And I'm telling you what is also what I am afraid that and this really doesn't have anything to do with adjusters per se, except that adjusters experience it when the claim comes down, is a lot of our municipalities or our states or our cities or even some of the counties may be believing this. Or if you have an HOA, for example, or county, wherever, I'm thinking of a particular place in Colorado where I have seen this, that the code is now you can't reuse any slopes. If you're only replacing 1 or 2 tiles on one slope, and the insurance company goes, okay, fine. If I got to replace like an entire slope or whatever, I'm going to harvest those tiles and use them somewhere else on the insured's house. There's code now saying you can't do that.
mm,
You have to buy an the actual product, and I swear the code says something to the effect of it has to be shrink wrapped with the name attached and the product bin number and blah, blah, blah. And of course, 9 times out of 10, these companies have gone out of business or that particular tile or shingle is no longer made. So you have to get a whole new different shingle, which means
mhm.
we go into the matching issues. And I'm afraid that our underwriters and agents don't know this when they're pricing the product, which means, again, we're all going to go back into this spiral of getting into a disagreement over what's wear and tear. What can we replace? What can we repair? The adjuster gets caught up in this later on. But if you are an adjuster, you need to be sending, underwriting notes, letting the underwriters know, hey, this is a code for the entire county or whatever. Just FYI, that's what you can do as an adjuster.
Well, I think the industry as a whole has a target on its back because they're large businesses that make billions of dollars every year
Mhm.
in revenue and in profits. They're always going to have a target on their back.
Mhm.
And in some states, you just have louder voices making the case against these the 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 standard exclusions that apply in most cases.
Right.
You've just got um, kind of this groundswell of people arguing against those and for coverage where it normally didn't exist. And then you've got legislators that are kind of on board with it for whatever reason. So
But
you
we want
wind
to
up
get
with these
elected.
you wind up with these big cultural shifts or pockets, I guess,
Yes.
where
Yes.
you've got these weird rules and laws and regulations around the handling of insurance claims.
Yes.
I mean, you and I have talked a lot about the depreciation of labor.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a very bright line between the states that allow it and don't allow it,
Yes.
where I should say states that will not allow depreciation of labor and states where it really doesn't matter to the insurance regulators.
Right.
So
But this
that
all, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, that's just the nature of state regulated, insurance coverage. So
There is, don't get me wrong, there is coverage for law and ordinance and increased cost due to code and that sort of thing. But we need to be taking that into consideration. If you're an agent listening to this, look at your building codes because they're all going by building codes is what they're going by. And let's price it right. But also it gets into our aging roofs and maybe our prior repairs and that sort of thing because we can see in these kind of mixed perils or whatever, like, oh, now there's a roof leak in the living room, blah, blah, blah. Well, yes, there is, but right over the living room is that cracked concrete tile that you've attempted to fix because, and we can see it because it has epoxy. You've like glued it
mhm,
back together and put this
right.
old tile on instead of what you were supposed to do, which is fix the entire roof, which we know is expensive. That's why you're trying to go around and say, "Hey, I've got a hailstorm. I need my roof replaced," like all of the roofers are doing right now in Kansas.
Hmm. Yeah, it certainly does complicate things.
Hmm.
And insurance companies are routinely blamed for just wanting to deny, delay, and defend, right?
Hmm.
And it's not always the case. And I would say that when it comes to the like wear and tear issues, they're just trying to get the language right so that they don't go out of business because if they your premiums are going to continue to go up if every roof claim on the face of the earth has to be paid because of some laws,
Yeah.
even though there's a question as to how the damage actually occurred. Um,
Which is why adjusters must document the sequence of failure. That's they have to tie it to the loss and the
an
damage.
event.
Yes, absolutely. Like, yes, there was a hailstorm on this date, or there was derecho winds, on this date, and that's what lifted the shingle up and bent it, and now we see a water leak in this particular area.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about concurrent causation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's basically when you've got two intervening causes that cause damage.
Yes. And okay, so most of the way that the policy is written, nine times out of 10, it's kind of like multiplying by zero, and then there's an exception to the exclusion on that. So just stick with me on it. So concurrent causations, nine times out of 10, the way that the policy is written, and of course, every policy is kind of different, is that if you have two causes of loss, one is covered and one is not covered, like wind and flood, for example, then we don't cover either one, period. Now, the state said, well, that's not fair. You should at least cover the wind part of it. I mean, that's what you're doing, right? You should at least cover the wind since you're saying wind is covered. All right. So then there are some states that have become anti-concurrent causation, which means you pay as the insurer, you pay for the loss that you would pay for. So in the event of flood and wind, instead of saying, wind is number one and then flood is zero, and so you take one times zero and you would get zero with no coverage. Now you're saying, no, 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 no. Anti-concurrent, you just take out that flood claim and you would pay the wind claim.
Right.
So
And that makes logical sense,
it
really,
does.
because you're just focusing on the damage that is covered and you're eliminating the stuff that isn't covered.
Hmm. Absolutely. And again, I would encourage our adjusters when we have these two kinds of claims like wind and flood, which we'll start seeing a lot of come hurricane season, which starts June 1st. Yay, hurricane season. I haven't heard how
For
bad it's
who?
going to be. Yeah, well, I was going to say I haven't heard how bad it was going to be, so maybe I shouldn't say yay hurricane season. But when you have these two kinds of policies, like a flood policy and a wind policy, adjusters work with the other adjuster, the other insurer, especially when the house, let's say, is just destroyed. We don't know which came first unless the flood claim came later. For example, when Katrina hit, we knew that we had wind. And then in some instances, the houses weren't inundated with flood water until 48 hours later. So, even though we weren't able to see that house until months later because of the amount of claims, we would call the flood adjuster and your insured would be able to get you that information and say, dude, what do you want to do here? You
Hmm.
know, that kind of deal. So,
So I was down for Harvey in Houston, and there was very little wind damage. I
mhm,
looked at hundreds of roofs down there, commercial and residential. And boy, we didn't see hardly any wind related damage at all. It
mm,
was all flood, and it was, Houston is known for that.
mhm,
Because they just had that hurricane just came in and parked over it and just rained and rained for like 2 weeks.
mhm.
So there really wasn't a whole lot of arguments about wind versus flood.
Right.
It was fairly obvious. You got 3 feet of water in your house. That's
Yeah,
flood,
that's flood.
and
That's
no
flood.
damage to the roof. Well,
Yeah.
this
Or the
is a pretty
second
easy one.
story or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But in places like Florida or Louisiana, where you do get a lot of wind, or even on the East Coast where you get a lot of wind,
Mhm.
it complicates things a little more. But you have to use your best judgment. And you had mentioned, the flood adjuster will be there along with the homeowner's adjuster or commercial adjuster.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. And I've been on those visits, and they're looking at different things than I am, and
Right.
we shake hands and exchange business cards, and pretty much, unless there's a dispute, we never really talk again.
Right.
Um,
But the thing I am trying to, I guess, emphasize is let's not have an estimate where the insured is left with something uninsured. Because the wind people are supposed to cover it. Oh no, that's the flood people are supposed to
oh,
cover it.
right,
Uh,
right.
it let's come to an understanding. It doesn't mean that our estimates are going to be the same,
Hmm.
but there may be one or two parts that could go either way. Well, then adjust the claim because both of you are adjusters. That's literally your job title.
Yeah,
Come to
in
a
my
conclude.
Harvey example, there wasn't a lot of exchange of
Right.
claim information because it was a really bright line between flood versus anything else. But when
Mm-hmm.
you've got other areas where the line is blurred,
Mm-hmm.
and did that you know did that section of the house come down because of flood water or
Or the wind.
because of the wind blew it apart?
Right.
Those are things that you do have to work with the flood adjuster to come up with an agreement as to who covers what. And
Exactly.
now the real problem occurs when you've got flood and wind and no flood coverage, and That happens quite often. Unfortunately, we just had a rain event here where there was a lot of areas that flooded that normally are never exposed to flood hazards. And the reason that happens is if, it's a very hilly and mountainous terrain up here in upstate New York, and the water, the creeks and stuff that flow down from these hills and mountains get clogged up sometimes with ice or trees or whatever, and you wind up with flooding in areas where you never really expected flooding. When that happens, you've got people who suffer flood damage
Right.
with no flood coverage, and that can be a tough spot to be in.
And be sure you look at your policy language because there is backup and overflow a lot of times of policy when we're looking at that. Backup means something has stopped and something is causing the barrier, and it's usually through a sewer system or plumbing system or something to that effect. But regardless, something has stopped the water and now it is backing up into the house versus overflow, which is something that is like, oh, there's so much water, it's going over the banks or whatever, and the sewer system can't handle it or whatever, and it now overflows. Two different things. It might look the same, but two different things with coverages, and you got to look at that.
Yeah, the overflow is generally like the analogy is if you poured coffee into your coffee cup until it overflowed
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
leaked onto whatever and caused damage.
Hmm.
So, but overflow of a river or a creek doesn't fall into that category.
That
That
would be
becomes
flood.
then that's flood, that's
That's flood.
groundwater.
Yeah.
And
And
there's
then normally dry
actually,
land, yada, yada, yada.
yeah, there's actually language about creeks and streams and
Hmm.
rivers, I think.
Hmm.
Um,
Anyway, the point being, read your policy, but I did want to like
yes.
put that in there, just boom. So I think we've kind of talked about the functional cosmetic repair versus full replacement based on scope
Yep.
and contractor pressure versus evidence-based scoping. That I think we should touch on just real quick before moving on, which is again, I had mentioned a lot of times our insured is a little confused, which is normal because who knows anything about insurance? Who wants to learn insurance? Nobody. And and so the insured would have an estimate from the contractor of, let's say, $100,000, whereas the adjuster, the insurance adjuster's estimate is, I don't know, $50,000, let's say. And then once RCV or depreciation is applied, all we're paying is, I don't know, $30,000. And the insured is going, that's $70,000 difference. What is it? What's wrong? And one of the things I think we should start talking about with our insureds is the fact that the contractor will write all of the damages. We may only write the covered damages, which means there could be damage out there that you definitely, Mr. and Mrs. Insured, have to fix. It just ain't covered, so I'm not going to write it. Or there would be costs involved with the loss that are reimbursable, which I would really love our adjusters to start putting in even the reimbursable things on the estimate so it shows that we've considered it. For example, permits to get construction going. Most of these places will require the contractor to file a permit cost, and they will pass that on to the insurance company. Or code upgrades or debris removal. All of that is like reimbursable. That has to be incurred, quote unquote. But I
Mhm.
wish we would put a little line saying debris removal TBD so it shows that we've considered it, because when the insured is comparing the things, trying to be apples to apples, they see that we're not having a lot of things that the contractor is having on their estimate, and they think we're lowballing
Sure.
and
The
trying to
reality
come.
is some claims you go to and you can write a complete global estimate from start to finish, and that estimate can represent the actual cost of the claim, where you can write a check to the contractor, less the deductible, and the story's over.
Mm-hmm.
That's not all of them, and I would argue that probably
Not
that's a minority of them, because most claims involving damage to a building are complex, and you
yes.
may have hidden damage that nobody can see until they start
Doing the
tearing
repairs.
things apart. There
Also have
may
damage
be,
creep.
right there, the building inspector may go out there and say, well, I see what you did here, but what we actually have to do to meet code is this and this and this. And if you've got code upgrade coverage, that's another thing that could be added on. So there's a lot of reasons why the original estimate is going to differ from um,
The contractor estimate or
the
the
final
final estimate.
cost,
Yeah, the
the
final
final
cost.
cost.
Right.
And I mean, I've finalized a claim where 2 months later the heating system failed, and it turns out that some damage from a small fire in the place, smoke damage actually caused premature corrosion in the heating system components, the electrical system, and that had to be replaced months after the claim was closed. It happens, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. But think about, again, coming from the insured's point of view, where the insurance company is the big bad wolf trying to lowball and delay, deny, defend. And here is the person that the insured has researched and trusted to repair their property, that being the contractor or the public adjuster, to write the estimate. And that differs so much from your estimate. And that is again why we have to educate the insured. And I really do wish that we would put these little things on there so that they see, yeah, we are going to pay for them. We're not forgetting it, but it's not due now. Like we know there's going to be code upgrades that we're going to have. We know that there's going to be debris removal. We just don't know what the price is.
Right.
We can't put it on there, but we're considering it.
Hmm.
I don't I don't know if that really makes sense, but I think it would reassure the insured to say, oh, they are looking at it. This is one of the reasons why, in addition to you verbally explaining it to the insured.
Yep.
Okay,
Anything can be considered. Doesn't mean everything will be paid.
exactly.
There may be real solid reasons why it can't be,
Mhm.
but
Openings created by the covered peril or what have you. Sometimes I was thinking again of wind versus flood. Sometimes you've got the flood taking up the whole first story or whatever, but you still have busted out windows up on the second story. Well, obviously that's wind.
right.
So,
So
and that might be
homeowners
interior
claim,
water damage too.
yeah, so homeowners policy will pay for interior water damage if the roof leaks.
Hmm.
Um, doesn't really say what has to happen to that roof for it to leak. That's why we pay for ice dams.
Hmm.
On a commercial policy, it's a little different. You do need an opening created by wind or some other direct cause of loss. Ice damming on a commercial policy is generally not covered unless there's an opening created by wind.
So,
So
so I hear a lot, and I never know how to respond to this. I hear a lot of public adjusters or contractors talking about, oh, well, there is openings created, or I guess there are openings in a roof. And I think you and I have talked about this before. There are openings in a roof because when we attach uh, I don't know, the furlings or the asphalt shingles or whatever, we're nailing them in. So the nails go through the roof and the membrane and all that. And you can go up into the ceiling and see where the roofs are, or the nails are coming through the plywood on. And I'm like, that's not really
that's not damage though.
yeah,
And
that's not an opening, though, guys. You're really stretching the language and torturing the language. But how do you respond to that? Because it makes sense to an insured. And remember, an insured is not as savvy as we are in the insurance profession about insurance, by the way, guys. I'm not saying they're not savvy. They are savvy, but you know what I mean.
I think the language of the policy requires that it's a storm-related opening or a wind-related opening.
But didn't you just say that in homeowners it doesn't really say that?
It doesn't.
So then it could be any kind of opening, and wouldn't a nail going through the roof be an opening?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's totally covered. Water that comes in through those little holes or creeps up behind the shingles or whatever in a homeowner's policy, or even if you have an old worn out roof
Mm.
and it's shedding water every day, and then one day it the wear and tear is such that it starts to leak now and you've got interior damage. I don't think you could make an argument that wear and tear is the underlying cause,
And then I think that
but
would be
the
denied is
but
because
the direct damage though is water damage. So I think I'd pay to repaint the ceiling or repair the ceiling, but I would tell the insured you got to get a new roof. It's wore out
yeah,
and leave it at that.
yeah, because that's wear and tear.
Right.
Right. Okay. Matching. Big.
Matchings. Yeah. Okay. So there are
Oh,
states that have matching statutes.
yes.
And
Florida and Texas are some.
yeah, Connecticut is one up here. So in those cases, from a practical standpoint, if you've got, generally speaking, for most roofs, if you've got a few shingles missing, you're probably going to replace the slope. Um, are you going to replace the whole roof? Sight lines come into play then, and you know, unless you can find an exact match, you're probably going to be closer to erring on the side of caution to replace the entire roof than just a slope. Um,
I want to interject something real quick because I learned something. I talk with some public adjusters, and we've had some public adjusters on our podcast before. I particularly love David Princeton. I feel that he is very down to earth, and I don't think he abuses the system the way some people do. But
mhm.
and I hope I didn't
There's a
offend
lot of
him.
good public
Of
adjusters
course,
out
of
there.
course. And I hope I didn't offend David by saying that.
Yeah,
But
David's not the only one out there,
I mean, yeah, I know. I love Nathan too, by the way. Love you, Nathan. Okay,
Yes.
so anyway, so what I was saying is uh and I think it was David or it might have been Nathan. I don't remember which, but I was reading one of their LinkedIn posts and they were talking about how all of these adjusters, all of the insurance companies like ITEL for when you have carpet that's not in stock anymore and you send
So
this
just to be clear,
oh
though, ITEL's not an insurance company.
yes, let's talk about ITEL real quick. Not an endorsement, although if you want to offer us money, ITEL, feel free. We would take it. And what ITEL is a company that you could send a sample to, and ITEL will tell you as the adjuster where the or what kind of carpet, what kind of tile, what kind of asphalt shingle it is, if there are any in anywhere in the United States, who the manufacturer is, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. And 9 times out of 10, this is what insurance companies are using to say, okay, so you've got a roof that needs to be replaced, or maybe just a slope that needs to be replaced. And you are saying, Mr. Contractor, Mr. Public Adjuster, or Ms. Public Adjuster, or Ms. Contractor, Mr. and Mrs. Insured, that you cannot get this roof because shingles are no longer being made. But I can tell you this is where there's a storage facility that has 300,000 shingles of that exact kind of shingle.
Right.
And so the insurance company will go, you can go there and get it and have the same matching roof. Well, either David or Nathan, they had said the issue is that insurance companies don't necessarily understand when a contractor goes to Home Depot or the roof shingle place or whatever, they often get a contractor discount and it's local. So there's no shipping charges. So all they got to do is pick it up and take it. And all of that is built into the pricing. But if we have to order shingles, let's say our insured is in Kansas and we have to order these shingles from this warehouse out in Florida, it has to be shipped here. So we have to add that on. So is it really a difference? Is there really a cost savings? Is it really the same? And I thought,
Right.
you know what? That is actually something I have never considered before. So I'm just throwing it out there. It's a good argument. It's something to be considered. There you go.
Sure. Yeah, and that happens, and I've actually seen that laid out in ITEL reports. And if it's not, it's at least commented on by an adjuster. It should be.
Yes.
It's an added cost, and it may be that the ITEL price after that shipping is more than it would be to just replace it with something local.
Yes. And therefore, adjusters, again, this is the one thing I'm going to tell you to do in that particular instance. You need to document your file that you went through all of these steps. I know it sounds like it's a pain in the rear, but you have to for bad faith issues. Because if I'm not seeing it as an expert witness that you went all the way through all of these considerations, then of course I'm going to try, I'm going to believe what the plaintiff, which is the insured, is saying, that you didn't consider these sorts of things. So you got to say, I looked at the ITEL thing, I did the pricing. It's just cheaper for to do it this way versus that way, and we're going to go that way. You got to explain your logic. Okay.
Yes. Why don't we move on to the practical adjuster framework and then close things out here
Yeah,
for the
because
day?
we've just been chatting away and
Oh,
try to
yeah.
keep this thing going. So
S-
what are the steps that we've got to do in our framework, Bill?
So first, establish the cause of loss, and by doing that, you're going to want to set. You'll then be able to separate what may be caused by a storm or some fortuitous event or some covered event versus what may have been there prior to the storm or what may be considered wear and tear rather than direct physical loss or fortuitous damage. And verify functional damage. If you've got if you got these endorsements that pay won't pay for cosmetic damage, you're going to have to nail down, okay, does this reduce the functionality of the materials or whatever of the item? And then document everything. As we just said,
Mhm.
make sure you're documenting that you're going through all the steps to make these verifications.
Yes.
And through the process, you got to communicate that all properly to the stakeholders, namely the policyholder and any of their contractors or public adjusters. I don't know how much you owe to the contractor necessarily, but the insured at the end of the day is the person that has to really understand it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, know that these spring storms that we're discussing, they are complex. It requires a lot of communication, which we don't necessarily have the time for, but it's going to save us time down the road, which is
Mm.
why we need to communicate with our insureds upfront.
Time and headaches.
Yes, and that documentation also helps us. When you're documenting your file, it's going to make it more watertight, pun and prove it intended. Yeah, and it makes the file more defensible.
Hmm.
So we need to, of course, stay sharp and stay aware of what we are doing when we are handling these kinds of claims.
Always imagine that you're in court on the stand being asked about your claim file, and if you keep that in mind when you're working your files, you'll potentially be a little more thorough.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, so our next episode will drop on Thursday, April the 23rd, and we're going to be talking construction because of course spring is when the months are warmer, days get longer, and so buildings start getting done, roofing starts getting done, all of the fun stuff starts getting done.
I'll wear my hard hat.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, I might even have my little high visibility thing going.
There you go.
So awesome. Yeah, so we will see you in 2 weeks.
Yes. Thank you and take care.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us on the Art of Adjusting podcast, where we talk about life as an insurance adjuster.
If you enjoyed this podcast or this episode, please give us 5 stars and a review. It does help the algorithm pick us up.
Hit that subscribe button real quick and tell all of your adjuster friends to check this out as well. For independent adjusting services, go to www.auten.claims. And for anyone interested in working as an independent liability adjuster, go to the Contact Us tab to join our roster.
In the meantime, you can contact me at theartofadjusting.com for consulting and training purposes.